In the news this week, can the new variant halt WA's border reopening plans? An exclusive discussion with medical experts on what's next before Christmas.
New revelations on Marlon Johns' tragic death revealed by WAMN News sparked questions in Parliament. We have exclusive reactions from the victim's mother. Plus, what can be done to prevent domestic violence? A one-on-one interview with Women's Interests Minister Simone McGurk. Plus, Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Leung and Sarah Smith.
Good evening. The new Omicron COVID variant has triggered international concerns as Western Australia is preparing to drop its borders next year, pending 90% double jab rates. Serious questions have been raised on whether this new variant will impact plans for WA's border reopening. AMA WA President Dr. Duncan-Smith joined me exclusively this week to discuss what will be next in this fast-moving situation. Dr. Duncan-Smith, thanks for joining us in such short notice. The new variant has triggered a lot of concerns. Should Western Australia delay its border reopening to interstate and internationally?
Well, look, we have to wait and see, Ivan. The new variant is concerning. There's 30 different mutations on the spike protein. The spike protein is what allows it to get into the human cell, but it's also what our vaccinations are directed against. So it's yet to be evaluated as to how effective the vaccines are currently against this new variant. It's a very concerning update, and certainly our state government needs to look at this and see whether it is necessary to delay opening. It could be a possibility if we find that our vaccines don't work against this, that it's particularly deadly, that it's much more easily transmitted. Well, these are factors the state government has to take into account before making that final decision to open up.
What sort of effect this new variant will have on the state government's decision-making when it comes to borders and vaccination?
Well, again, we'd have to wait and see, because if we don't get this variant in Australia at all because of the travel bans that are in place, well, then WA could carry on with its current plan of looking at setting a target when we reach 80% for when we anticipate reaching 90%. But if this variant actually gets into Australia and is not in Western Australia, well, then the WA government is going to have to look at potentially keeping the borders up if this variant turns out to be particularly nasty, particularly easily transmitted, and most importantly, causes more deaths than previous variants. This will also especially be the case if this variant does not have good coverage by the current vaccinations.
With the new variant emerging and the Delta variant on our doorstep, what's your message to those people who are not vaccinated?
I think at this stage, if you're unvaccinated, you really have to think about this carefully and just go out and get vaccinated. The double-dose Pfizer gives you 84% protection against Delta. And if you get the third booster or the third part of the vaccine, then you end up at 94% protection against Delta. Now, it's unlikely that the new variant will have complete escaping the immune system. So in other words, if the vaccine works well against Delta, it's highly likely it's going to work well against the new variant. But again, we don't know yet, and we've got to wait and see. But any vaccine to the new variant is going to be months away. And so the message should be, if you're unvaccinated at this point in time, go get vaccinated. We've got Delta strain on our doorstep in the Northern Territory, and it could be just a matter of days before we get an outbreak. When you get vaccinated is not when the outbreak occurs. You want to be vaccinated well before that so that your immune system has had a chance to kick in.
Dr. Duncan-Smith, thanks for joining us in such short notice.
No worries. Take care, Ivan. Ciao.
Concerns are being raised in Parliament about the effectiveness of cultural awareness training for public transit officers after a popular young man died after being hit by a train in Fremantle.
WAMN News' new revelations about Marlon Johns' tragic death sparked questions by the state opposition in Parliament after a former transit guard raised allegations of racial discrimination. Reporter Nelson Liu has more on this. Nelson, what were the answers and what did the family say?
Yes, well, the impact of Marlon Johns' tragic death has gone a step further, with questions about cultural awareness among public transit officers now being raised in Parliament following our explosive report. Marlon was hit by a train at Fremantle Station during the early hours of the morning in late February, after he was refused entry onto the last free train. A former transit officer has since come forward, revealing allegations of racism on Perth's train lines and an insight into Marlon, who had become a changed man.
I will be writing to the CCC and asking if in the future they can take an interest in the transit officers and to ensure that that they're happy that their activities are closely monitored.
Shadow Transport spokesperson Shane Love put the questions to Transport Minister Rita Safiotti during question time this week, asking about investigations into the culture of transit guards.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Transport. Minister, I refer to startling revelations reported by WAM News of a toxic culture permeating Perth transit guards and a PTA statement issued in response last week. And I ask, is the Minister aware of these reports and what investigation into the culture of PTA guards has she undertaken? And two, will the Minister commit to ensuring that the cultural awareness training required as part of the Guards' essential training is reviewed and improved?
The Minister for Transport.
Thank you. I am aware of the reports that the member has alluded to, but I can assure the member that all transit officers undertake cultural awareness training by recognised providers part of their training. And that cultural awareness training has received positive feedback, and we continue to reinforce cultural awareness training as part of the work that transit officers and transit officers do across the network. There's transit officers who operate in tough environments across the network, and they're doing a very good job in helping assist the public and also in protecting the public. So I think some of the allegations made, and remember, if you've got any specific allegation you've got against any particular officer, you're invited to write to me on any specific allegation, or of course refer it to the appropriate authorities. But cultural awareness training is part of what the transit officers do, and as we know, there are many of them doing a very, very good job across the network, making sure that our public transport system is safe.
Supplementary question.
Minister, are you satisfied that there's sufficient oversight of the transit officers by the PTA, given that they have these powers to use force and arrest?
The Minister.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Marlon Johns' mother, Cheryl Butcher, is thankful that the incident is being raised in Parliament. Since her son's death, Cheryl promised Marlon that she wouldn't let her fight for answers go.
I'm glad it has been brought up in Parliament. I'm thankful to everybody that's taking notice of this, because this is a big, big issue. And it's not just about Marlon's death, it's also about other people that do use the Transperth.
The long-running search for the answers into Marlon Johns' death is far from over, but for Cheryl, there are hopes that this is the start to uncovering the reason that cost Marlon his life. It's back to you.
Thanks, Nelson. WA has launched its 5th annual 16 Days of Activism against gender-based violence this week, encouraging Australians to challenge attitudes and behaviours that lead to domestic and family violence. With statistics revealing 1 in 5 Australians believe domestic violence is a normal reaction to stress, the push is on to say no violence is ever acceptable. Steve Anderson reports.
Mark McGowan recently launched the 16 Days in WA campaign, which aims to combat domestic violence in Western Australia by raising awareness of family and domestic violence. This is the 5th year the campaign has run.
Aware, and we all have a responsibility to call out family and domestic violence.
Minister for the Prevention of Family and Domestic Violence, Simone McGurk, opened the expansions to the facility on Friday. The $2 million commitment has delivered on a key election promise by the McGowan government.
The hard reality is that Western Australia has a problem when it comes to family violence and violence against women.
If you or someone else you know is experiencing domestic abuse, you can contact the White Ribbon at 1-800-737-732 for help, or go to www.whiteribbon.org.au for more information. Steve Anderson, WAMN News.
Still ahead tonight, what can be done to prevent domestic violence?
I have a one-on-one interview with Women's Interest Minister Simone McGurk on family and domestic violence awareness. All that, plus Dr. Andrew Miller's expert COVID-19 comment. See you in 5 minutes for Western Perspective. Don't go away.
Thanks, Melly. A man has died after he was stabbed to death in Northbridge this weekend. It happened on early Saturday morning at around 2:30 a.m. with police officers witnessing the ordeal. Despite their immediate attendance, the man has died on the scene after receiving a fatal wound on his chest. 2 young men aged 18 and 19 were arrested as police increased their presence in Northbridge following the attacks. Several streets were cordoned off on Saturday as investigation continues.
New laws are giving WA police officers the power to keep firearms off the street, targeting outlaw motorcycle gangs and organised crime figures. New firearm prohibition orders will ban anyone posing a threat to the community from holding a gun licence and make manufacturing 3D printed firearms illegal, all the while increasing stop and search powers. Penalties for breaches are set to result in up to 14 years jail and fines of up to $75,000.
We want young men to stop joining outlaw motorcycle gangs. And through these laws, they will see the impact it has on their families and loved ones and give them other opportunities to do better things in our community than join these clubs.
No, the Commissioner just has to determine that these people represent a reasonable threat and mostly that they're not a fit and proper person to be in possession of a firearm.
Perth has sweltered in one of its hottest weekends this summer. The mercury has peaked 37.4 degrees this weekend as Western Australians prepare for summer. It was clear skies and dry during the weekend with no chance of rain. Temperatures will drop back to mid-20s for the next few days, with a minimum of 12 degrees on Wednesday night before hitting 28 degrees on Thursday and 32 degrees again on Friday. The Weather Bureau says it will be mostly sunny for Perth during the entire week.
WA is setting its sights on becoming a global hydrogen energy powerhouse with new energy hubs in the Pilbara and Midwest. The McGowan government is investing up to $117 million to attract federal funding for the plan, capitalising on solar and wind resources, land, export infrastructure and trading partnerships. It's expected to create around 2,000 skilled and semi-skilled jobs, and the government says WA has every advantage we need to become a world leader in renewable hydrogen.
What a way to end the year with another song in Parliament. Cultural and Arts Minister David Templeman is famous for being a showman and a serious minister at the same time. This year, he chose to end Parliament with Frank Sinatra's My Way as the chamber ends in applause from all sides.
Do your family and state turn, get vaccinated. Merry Christmas, everyone.
You know, Sarah, David always has his way when he finishes Parliament.
If you could sing anything, what would it be?
Oh, that would take me, another 12 months to actually make up my mind?
Well, you do have time. It's all good.
I'll take my time.
We'll recap this week's top stories again in just a moment.
But right now, here's Melissa Thorne with Western Perspective. Melly, good evening.
Thanks, Ivan and Sarah. Welcome to Western Perspective. I'm Melissa Thorne. Domestic violence remains one of WA's top issues, with a major campaign to raise awareness being rolled out over the next 2 weeks. Extra support has been announced, with the launch of expansions to a refuge for domestic violence victims in Kwinana. I sat down with the Minister for Women's Interest, Simone McGurk, to discuss the issues surrounding the family and domestic violence issues. Can you please tell me about the importance of this centre in regards to young women maybe experiencing domestic violence?
We're here today at the expanded opening of Andrea Meyer, which is a women's refuge in the Kwinana area, and we opened the facility. It was brand new 12 months ago, and when we opened it, we actually had an opportunity through some COVID recovery funds that were available through the state government to increase the capacity. So today we're announcing a doubling of the capacity of this refuge. What's important about this particular women's refuge is that it can cater for lots of different families, lots of different demographics. So it particularly, they're standalone units that have central security and some central security as well as facilities, but each of the units is standalone, but there is an ability to open up between units so that you can have much larger families available, and that includes you could have teenage children and teenage boys, which has been a restriction in some of the previous women's refuges that were kind of communal living, and it was difficult to have older boys there.
How many families and people can the centre support at one time?
We've just increased it to 12 families, so that can either be an individual person or with a number of children.
How long do people tend to stay?
Oh, look, that'll vary depending on the circumstances that the family are going through, or the women and their children are going through. So it can be a very short period of time, or it could be for a longer period of time while other accommodation is sourced or their legal or safety issues are resolved.
So you mentioned teenage boys before. What services are available for men experiencing domestic violence in WA?
Any of the services that are available for anyone experiencing domestic violence can be sourced through any of the helplines or any of the facilities. Our experience is that it's usually boys, like children of older boys, as children of women who are experiencing domestic violence. And so there is a men's helpline as well as a women's helpline that's available.
What advice would you have for any victims of domestic violence who are watching this?
I think the main issue that we need to understand is that that domestic violence or family violence, violence against women, can take many forms. It can sometimes be physical abuse, but it can also be controlling behaviour, financial abuse and the like. So reach out and get help. There are helplines available, and perhaps we can make them available on your program.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, you can contact White Ribbon at 1800 737 732 for help, or go to their website for more information. And now, here is AMAWA spokesman Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly COVID-19 update and commentary.
Hi, thanks for your time. Certainly Omicron is going to be the word for this Christmas. Everyone will be talking about something they've never heard of before, except of course the Greek speakers amongst us. So this particular variant is transmitting extremely quickly, and that's about all we know about it at the moment. We don't know if it is as dangerous or more or less dangerous than the current version of Delta that's out there, but we do know that it's a very, very rapid thing, and we already see a couple of cases in Sydney, and we would have good reason to expect that anywhere that has open travel will already have been exposed to this variant and will now start to take over, it seems, the area that Delta's been occupying. Until we get a handle on whether our vaccine coverage is any good for it and on how severe the disease is as a result of this variant, we're not going to be able to understand what our best responses should be in the longer run. We know exactly what to do in the short term, and that hasn't changed since the start of the pandemic. This is an airborne disease. We must always be breathing clean air. That means that we need to use very effective masks whenever we might be around other people when this is in our community. And we also need to be ventilating our indoor air spaces properly with fresh air and monitoring the carbon dioxide levels and making sure that people are wearing masks when they're in close contact. Now, all of those things will unravel quickly over the next week or two as we see exactly what the situation is here in Western Australia. We need to be alert but not alarmed. We know what to do. And in terms of a vaccine for this variant, once we figure out if we need a top up on the current vaccines, then it may be that we start seeing a different booster rolled out or a completely new vaccine rolled out. And one of the great things about this mRNA technology that Pfizer and Moderna have is that it can pivot extremely quickly to a new type of vaccine. And now that we have the distribution and the administration of these vaccines in place, then there's no reason to believe that we wouldn't be able to very quickly attend to vaccinating the population with something that could work for this variant. Now, that also means we've got to take care of the business of vaccinating our 5 to 11-year-olds. Frustratingly slow in Australia, given that we've had many millions of children now overseas vaccinated, and although that may not be complete protection against this new variant, at least that is something to prevent those rare cases of severe short-term disease and those much more common cases, unfortunately, of long COVID that we're seeing in the paediatric group as well as in the adult group. So will this mean more border restrictions in the short term? Yes. Is it going to disrupt people's travel plans for Christmas in the short term? Absolutely it will, unfortunately, and we know the toll that's taking on people, and that's why also air-gapped quarantine, effective processes, testing on arrival, all these things that we've been banging on about for over a year are just as important as they ever were, not just for this variant of concern, but for the next one and the next one and the next one, because we know that this disease has a long way to run, that there are many countries that haven't had our advantages so far in terms of vaccination, and that means that there's fertile breeding ground to throw off more variants as time goes by. Thanks very much for your time, and if you can find your kids an N95 or KF94 mask for Christmas, I think that's a really good present. Cheers.
That's Dr. Andrew Miller, and that's Western Perspective for this week. We will be back next time. But for now, it's back to you, Ivan and Sarah.
Thanks, Melly. And here's Leo with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, guys. And on 6 News breaking news, the new COVID-19 variant detected in more countries as the World Health Organization names it Omicron. Travel restrictions imposed on southern Africa over what's now being labelled a variant of concern. Los Angeles authorities slammed so-called tinfoil hat-wearing tossers over reports Aboriginal people are being forcibly removed from their homes and taken into enforced quarantine. The claim spreading overseas, but some are actually missing basic facts about who's who in Australian politics. And the world reacts to Pat Cummins being appointed Australia's Test cricket captain, with Steve Smith as his deputy, as Tim Payne announces he'll be taking a leave of absence from all cricket for the foreseeable future. You can see full details on those stories and plenty more by heading to our YouTube channel. Just search 6 News Australia to find us, or our website 6newsau.com. For now though, guys, it's back to you.
Thanks, Leo. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
From Sarah and myself, we wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for stopping by.